Hello, it's Len from Straight Talk from the Homeland. Welcome back to the channel. With the world in increasing conflict, with war in Ukraine and Sudan and ongoing genocides in Gaza, and it seems that the permanent members of the Security Council are actually behind this, something not probably envisaged rather naively post World War II when the UN was being set up. Uh, requires that the world needs to come together to reform the UN. Now, I know that people have talked about reform for some time, given that the UN structure is essentially frozen as it was in post World War II, and the world has changed. 60% of the world's population now lives in Asia, but it's not properly represented. For example, India not on the Security Council. So, personally, I don't care whether people say it's too hard to reform, that the big powers will veto all the time, because if the UN does not change, uh, perhaps it might be temporarily suspended and reformed in some way. Then the relevance of this organization, this wonderful organization set up to help peace on the planet, and which has thousands of very professional, amazing people working for it, that organization will die inevitably. With the move towards great power politics, we see the so-called spheres of influence from the 19th century re-emerging with, for example, the North Americas. If you're in Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Panama, or now Venezuela, you'll know what I'm talking about. So when it comes to the UN as an organization, it can't function if more powerful states delinquent don't pay their fees and which try and use their sanctioned powers to uh, subvert the course of justice, as in the case of the International Criminal Court. I mean, it wasn't set up to just prosecute brown people, was it? It was set up for justice, uh, prosecuting war criminals, doesn't matter where they came from. But that's not the case according to the US. So just quickly then, what would I do? Well, I would first and foremost uh, ask people to understand that it's either reform or die. So we must do it. And so the disunited nations of the present becomes really the United Nations of the future. The UN Security Council needs complete reform. I believe it needs a small expansion to 18 members, better reflecting the population basis. I mean, I don't expect that Asia, which has 60% of the world's population, would have 60% of the members, so I just use the square root of that population, of the world's total, to come up with 7 seats for Asia, and I include one of those 7 for the Pacific, which is half the world, the Pacific Ocean, but which is never adequately represented. Of which 3 members will be permanent. That's obviously China and Russia. Russia having most of its landmass within Asia, and increasingly part of the BRICS, moving towards the Asian sphere. And permanent member India. Remember, no veto power. And that would leave from North America 2, South America 2. Brazil has a case for permanent membership, but I leave that to the powers that be. But if it isn't, then those two seats would be on a rotating basis, obviously. Europe would have 3, 2 of which were the permanent members, UK and France, and that leaves 4 for Africa. For the first time, African interests would be better represented. They would have to do a resolution by supermajority, 12 of the 18, and that means that if the vast majority of the world believes in a resolution, then it should be followed. This is, after all, what we call democracy, isn't it? ICAO itself has its own Council of States, and of course, one of their primary functions is to help with international standards. But I think our um, former colleagues would agree with me that the politicking that sometimes goes on is also a bit of a problem. Whereas big and powerful states try and influence decisions and directions away from what should be the best outcome for all. So, for example, even simple things like the election of the General Assembly president, it should be on a continent by continent rotating basis. They can vote for a person that best represents their continent, but it shouldn't be on a most powerful or just Western countries getting their way. The even position of the UN headquarters has been discussed because of the recent terrible decision by the US to deny visas to Palestinians. Uh, I believe that the UN headquarters would be better placed where most of the people live in the world these days, in Asia, uh, where the center of economic activity is. Uh, and I can't think of a better place in Singapore. Perhaps I'm a little bit biased, but Singaporeans do most things well. They're a small country that doesn't have a beef with others, and I'm sure that it would be a better situation, a more neutral situation than is currently the case in New York. And I'm quite sure Singapore would ensure that the functions of the UN would be well looked after. Uh, that's just my personal opinion. I'm sure others will have other ideas, but the UN needs a reform, not just its location, uh, how the Security Council works, the funding of its critical mechanisms. It needs to ensure that international law is respected. Big states like the US should be having no excuse to ratify critical conventions like UNCLOS, the Law of the Sea. At the moment, it's not even a member. It's not a member of the International Criminal Court, yet it thinks it can sanction the court. Uh, there needs to be an inclusive approach rather than big powers dictating to the rest of the world, because otherwise we won't have a world anymore. It's the way that humanity is going, unfortunately. So, on a positive note, again, my congratulations to all my UN former colleagues for the work that they've done and continue to do at the risk of their lives. I look forward to the disunited nations becoming a more united nations, and one that's able to protect our children's future, the future of this planet, uh, because we only have one planet, and we need to ensure that everybody is working towards a positive future. Thank you for listening. This is Len from Straight Talk from the Homeland.